You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
And welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcox. After last week's show, a bit of a mystery came about, and so I spent the last 7 days or so, 6 and some change anyway, trying to sort this mystery out. We'll get to the mystery in a minute. But I got to tell you, too, part of my research involved me going to the public library today, spent about an hour up there, had some interesting phone calls. I spoke with the former city manager, Peter Varney, a couple times a day, in fact. While I was at the library, I happened to come across a book I'd seen before. Tracy Thompson had showed me this book, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago when I was doing some research on Rocky Mount utilities and so forth. And I remembered the book, but I couldn't remember the name of it or where it was at within the library. So I went to try to find that book, eventually found it. And of course, it's in the historical section of the library, so you can't check it out, you can't leave with it. And I took a bunch of pictures with my phone of different things in the book, including some photographs and so forth, that I was going to share with you, but frankly, it just didn't come out good. They were blurry, the pages were sometimes at an angle. So I said, well, that's not going to do. So I came back to my office and started making some more phone calls. And, you know, I'm always amazed at the generosity of people when we're doing something like this. But I made a couple of phone calls that, hey, I'm trying to find this book. And I gave them the title of it. And literally within an hour, someone called me and said, hey, I got your book. So first of all, let me share with you the book. I love this book. It's called A Century of Service, City of Rocky Mount Public Utilities. And like I said, I'd seen the book before. Tracy Thompson showed it to me, I don't know, a year and a half or two ago. And it's just chock-a-block full of information about the Rocky Mount City utilities, including power, water, gas, and it goes back 100 years, and so over 100 years, in fact. The book, I think, was published in 2002. So, you know, some things that are not entirely current now, but there's a lot of good history in here. And the public library has 3 of these books. So if you'd like to go by and take a gander at it, as far as I know, this is the only one that was available. The person that gave me this one said there were no more. And so I was thrilled to get this book, and I spent the last 3 or 4 hours this afternoon going through it, took some more pictures, and I got a scanner in my office, so I was able to get some little better imagery. But the bottom line is, I intend to spend much more time with this book in the coming days and weeks, and we'll be sharing some more about it. You know, we all take for granted that when we walk into a room and hit the light switch, the light's going to come on. When we go in the bathroom or kitchen and turn the spigot on, water's going to flow out. When we flush the commode, it's going somewhere. We don't know where, we don't care, as long as it goes away. That's all we want to see happen. Well, all of that involves public utilities. And so, you know, Rocky Mount has been, over the years, many times referred to as a very progressive city. Now, some don't see that as necessarily a good thing, but when it comes to infrastructure, public utility, and so forth, particularly in the past, there have been some problems of late, I'll be the first to admit. But in the past, Rocky Mount's had a good reputation of being very progressive when it comes to providing those kinds of services. They're not always the cheapest, but Rocky Mount has been really good since the turn of the century, in fact, about going through whatever process it took to get us power. I say us, those that were alive in that time frame, water, electricity, sewage, and so forth. So the big mystery was, if you remember from last week's show, we showed an aerial photograph that I think J.B. Williams had taken. That was, the plane was flying over roughly the city lake, and it was a shot of the city lake, Sunset Avenue, the power plant, the water treatment plant, Sunset Park, that area right down there. And I remembered from past episodes and past research that the water treatment plant had come into being sometime in the 1930s. I couldn't remember the exact date. But so sometime in that time frame. But I also remembered that, if you watch the show each week, you know we've talked about this before, back in 1899. In fact, Lee, go ahead if you would put up picture number 1. In 1899, there was a place on Stony Creek called Bun Hole. I don't know why it was called that. That's just what it was called by the locals at that time. But the city of Rocky Mount purchased some property there. It was a couple acres, as I understand, and they built a structure there. It was a pumping station, and they began pumping water out of Stony Creek to Rocky Mount. The reason being, Tar River had become contaminated for a lot of reasons. Number one, cities upstream of us, like Lewisburg, for example, was dumping, there you go, they were dumping raw sewage into Tar River. Of course, there were all kinds of pollutants up and down the river between us and Lewisburg. But the bottom line was, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Tar River was so polluted, it was considered to be a health risk. In fact, there were outbreaks, not necessarily around here, but across the state and across the country. In fact, there were outbreaks of typhoid and dysentery and some really terrible diseases. And they become to realize that a lot of those diseases were waterborne and come from, untreated, unclean water. And so at that time, Stony Creek was considered to be pristine water. So City of Rocky Mount purchased this land. They bought the land for $266.67 in 1899. And they built the water plant there in the fall of 1899 and early winter of 1900. And of course, today, this is the site of the Rocky Mount Moose Lodge on Country Club Drive. Now, the mystery came in that I knew this building became operational around 1900, and it ran as a city pumping station for about 10 years or so. And we know that because, and I was trying to find the article, I couldn't get my hands on it at the last minute, I was looking for it. But we've got an article somewhere in my collection of when a group of local businessmen purchased this building from the city of Rocky Mount, and I think the date was somewhere around 1910, 1912, somewhere in that time frame, and it became the first country club. Long before Benvenue Country Club ever came into existence, this was the country club. So if the city of Rocky Mount sold this building, and of course the pumping station ceased to be in operation around 1910 or 1920, and the new water treatment plant over on Sunset Avenue and by Sunset Park didn't come into being until 1930s thereabout. The mystery was, well, where did we get our water in between? It was almost 10, 15, almost 20 years there where the water had to come from somewhere, so where did it come from? So that set me out looking and trying to find the answer to that question. And like I said, I spent quite a bit of time looking and researching. And so, Lee, I tell you what, let's go on to item number 2. One of the images that was in this book is actually from a map from 1908. And in 1908, this map identifies the location of the water and power plant that was going to be erected. When this map was made, the buildings weren't there yet. But what you're looking at there, that kind of line across the very top is Tar River. The one going vertically up and down right in the middle of your screen at that time was referred to as Stony Creek Road. Now, it's now, of course, Sunset Avenue. And off to the far right, that's a railroad track there. Off to the left, coming at an angle, is another railroad track. And so this was a map of the property of Rocky Mount Waterworks and Light Plant site. So, if you'll notice, they're both, the light plant and the water plant, are on the left side or the south side of Sunset Avenue. So I thought, well, wait a minute. We knew about the power plant. We've had a couple shows about the power plant, shown various stages of the power plant over the years. And we've shown the railroad tracks where the coal would be brought in to fire up the boilers and so forth, to run the steam turbines, to run the generators, to produce electricity. So we knew all of that was there adjacent to the riverbank on the south side of Sunset Avenue. But according to this map, there was a water pumping station there as well. Now, as I said, I looked in earnest to try to find some article or something. I went way back in the newspapers.com website, and the more I scoured, the more I looked, to the least I could find anything. But lo and behold, in this A Century of Service, the City of Rocky Mount Public Utilities book, there was some great information in here. And I'm just going to read a couple of passages from you here. One, it says, The process of the 1901 bond issue, while primarily designed for the construction of an electric light plant, was also used for building public sanitary sewer lines in Rocky Mount. The first sewage system built in 1901 was primarily a collection system. There was no treatment and lines simply discharged directly into Tar River. I got a bit ahead of myself there. That's obviously talking about the sewage system. But ironically, we started pulling water from Stony Creek in 1899, 1900 because Tar River was polluted from upstream pollutants and municipalities and cities dumping raw sewage into the river. And lo and behold, Rocky Mount was doing the same thing. This became a big stink, no pun intended, by the way, in later years between Rocky Mount and Lewisburg. Rocky Mount sued Lewisburg, in fact, because the state law had come out and said you can't dump untreated wastewater into a flowing stream, and Lewisburg was still doing that. Greenville got upset with us for the very same reason, putting raw sewage into Tar River. But let me back up a minute because I didn't plan to get that far ahead of myself there. I want to just read a little bit here about the site. It says the completion of the Stony Creek water pumping station in the early 1900 marked the beginning of a comprehensive program of municipal utility services that would all but eradicate waterborne disease in the community. Plans for expansion of the waterworks began almost immediately. The Board of Commissioners authorized the building of a cistern at the new pumping station in July 1902. Now keep in mind, when they refer to the new pumping station in 1902, that is the one on Stony Creek, there where the Moose Lodge is today. And it says, and an additional 6 acres of land at the site was purchased in 1902 and 1903. The pumping station was outfitted with a wood-fired boiler, and sand and gravel were used for the filters at the plant. In the early days, a water tender actually lived in the brick building, although the pumping station became less isolated in 1903 when the town built a bridge across Stony Creek at the station. Filtration treatment and chlorination of the water after 1902 meant that the residents of Rocky Mount no longer had to worry about the threat of typhoid fever and dysentery from drinking river water contaminated by upstream users. So not only did they build a pumping station there, there was a sanitation system in place there to sanitize the water. It utilized sand and gravel and some chemicals, some chlorination was involved. And so Rocky Mount was pumping purified water from Stony Creek into the city of Rocky Mount as its primary water source in the early 1900s. And again, this was, for a period of about 10 years, Rocky Mount's primary source of drinking water. And so, as I said, the mystery became, where did we get our water in between the time that this stopped being operational and the time that the water treatment plant on Sunset Avenue became operational in 1936, actually. And so, like I said, the more I looked, I began to find references to other water stations and other pumping stations, for example. Lee, let's go to item number 3 before we get too far along here. We've shown this picture before on the show. This is actually a picture from 1915. And a couple things I'll draw your attention to. Number one, this is looking down Sunset Avenue. That's the river bridge on the right-hand side of your screen there, going over Tar River if you're headed west on Sunset Avenue. And again, in 1915, I didn't know this until today, that road was known as Stony Creek Road. It wasn't Sunset Avenue until many years later. Another thing I'll draw your attention to, on the left-hand side, that mound you see there, there was a storage tank. Okay, there's 2 of them there. If you go by there today, you can still see them. They're big, great big concrete storage tanks. They hold water. I think one of them holds about 500,000 gallons. The other one holds about 250,000 gallons of water. But keep in mind, in 1915, there was no water treatment plant across Sunset Avenue. Okay, so again, this is another clue that in addition to the power plant being here, there was a water treatment plant, a pumping station right here. The article says adjacent to the power plant. So right beside the power plant over there where Chico's and all it is now, there was a water pumping station, treatment plant right there. And these 2 mounds, you only see one in this picture, but the 2 mounds on the left-hand side would have been where the water was stored before it was eventually pumped out through water mains to provide water for the city of Rocky Mount. And this, of course, went in operation after the water treatment plant on Stony Creek Drive shut down around 1910, 1912, somewhere along in there. The other thing I'll call your attention to is this power plant building underwent several renovations over the years. You'll notice, number one, it's only 1 story at this point. In 1915, it was a 1-story building. There was also no smokestack on the right-hand side. Eventually, it would come to have 2 smokestacks, one on each end, and in later years, one of those would go away. Okay, Lee, let's move on then if we could. Item number 4. About the same time all this was going on, building water plants, building and increasing production of power plants and so forth, Rocky Mount got into the gas business. And we've shown this exact same picture on a previous show. This was Rocky Mount's gas plant. The caption reads, built in 1914, Rocky Mount's manufactured gas plant was located on Albemarle Avenue at the current location of the city's fleet maintenance facilities. The gas plant, there to the left, burned coal in the absence of oxygen to create a low BTU gas, which was then stored in the collapsible gas holder at right. That's, if you heard the term gasification, that's been around for many, many years. You can actually run a gasoline engine off burned wood and different types of combustibles by basically letting them smolder before they burst into flame. If you take away the oxygen, they can't burst into flame. But the heat will cause them to smolder. The gas they put off is flammable, and a gasoline motor will run off those flammable smoke and fumes, and that's technically referred to as gasification, and that's how these plants were operated. Okay, Lee, I got a little ahead of myself earlier, but I mentioned about the sewage plant. As I said, Rocky Mount had realized, in fact, the nation by this time had realized that a lot of these diseases, typhoid, dysentery, and so forth, were waterborne diseases. And if you could get your water clean, you could eliminate a lot of these diseases. And so sewage plants became just as important as power plants and water plants, and the city of Rocky Mount undertook a program, if you will, to get a working sewage plant in the city. Item number 5, Lee, this is ironically also in 1914, the same time they built the gas plant, they had plans in place to build a sewage plant. The caption here reads, the city's first sewage disposal works, built in 1910 and 1911, was known as a Phelps plant, P-H-E-L-P-S, Phelps plant. Shown are plans for the settling basins, designed by Gilbert C. White, who would later design other public works for Rocky Mount. The plant was located on a 2-acre site on the Tar River between North Church Street and the ACL Railroad at the lowest point in the city. Where they're talking about here is right there at going under the trestle there at the North Church Street. If you turn there by Wholesale Paint Center, go around the curve and go under the trestle there. That area right there between Church Street and the train track was Rocky Mount's sewage system. And it was built between 1910 and 1911. And so it utilized a series of settling tanks, but the raw sewage would go into these tanks. And there was no treatment to speak of. I mean, there was no chemical treatment like they use today to remove the bacteria and so forth. They would just let the water sit in these settling tanks, and then it was eventually discharged back into the river. And so it was really, from a sanitary standpoint, it obviously was not very sanitary. Prior to that, however, as I read in that caption earlier, raw sewer was just dumped right into the city. I mean, right into the Tar River. There was no effort made to decontaminate it or purify it in any way. Okay, I just realized we're time for our first commercial break. Lee, bring it back to me if you could. When we come back from the break, we're going to show you some more pictures, talk a little bit more about not only water and sewage and gas, but some of the innovations and things that happened over the years. Rocky Mount was really, in some ways, ahead of its time. It kind of led the state, and in fact, in many ways, led the country in some innovations in this technology. So we'll talk about that, show you some more pictures. We'll take your calls. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
On a Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory. as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitation and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't arise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
And we're back. We're talking about public utilities tonight. As I said at the top of the show, if you missed the opening of the show, I went to the library today to see my friend Tracy Thompson. We talked a little bit about public utilities, and I knew there was a book up there she had shown me a couple of years ago or so. I couldn't remember the name of it, but together we were able to find it. It's called A Century of Service, City of Rocky Mount Public Utilities. I love this book already. I managed to get a copy today. The library had 3 copies, but of course they were in the local history section, which means you can't check them out. So I made some phone calls. I found someone who had one. They graciously agreed to give it to me to add to my library, so I'm thrilled for that. Thank you. So I'm not going to call the person's name. They asked not to be identified on the air, so I won't do that, but I am very much appreciative. As I said, we're talking about Rocky Mount's evolving, if you will, through the years with their water, power, sewage, gas. Public utilities is the byword. And I was really surprised at the different stages that the development of the local municipality went through providing these services to the public. And so, we were talking about water a few minutes ago. 1899, they start tapping water at Stony Creek. Prior to that, I should have said this earlier, prior to 1899, when they built the water pumping station over on Stony Creek, most water in town was from wells. There was some cisterns scattered about, but by and large, I get a mental image of riding into town on horseback and seeing pulling your horse up to front of the saloon, there being a trough out there full of water, and everybody goes up, takes a ladle, and gets a sip of water out of a trough that's also drinking water for the horses, and everybody comes through town. I envisioned something like that. I'm sure it wasn't that way everywhere, but the point is, we just didn't have running water, very early, and so that meant you got it out of a well, or you hauled it from the river in many cases, and you stored it on your own property perhaps. You think about the businesses that had to operate all day without running water, without. I'm sure they may have had a Johnny house out back. And by the way, there was early days of Rocky Mount, there was no sewage system. As I said before, raw sewage, when it was piped anywhere, it was just piped out to the river and allowed to run right into the river. And so that caused problems, obviously. And the same thing was happening all up and down Tar River. You know, upstream from us, Lewisburg was doing it. Downstream from us, Greenville was doing it. We were contaminating Greenville's water. Lewisburg was contaminating our water. And it took literally some lawsuits to get it all sorted out. The state of North Carolina was very helpful in enacting legislation that said, hey, you got to stop doing this. You know, it's unsafe for one thing, unsanitary, but you got to stop doing it. And so eventually, every town, every municipality up and down the stream, not only Tar River, but Neuse River and all the rivers in the state for that matter, across the country, began implementing these policies and building sewage systems and so forth. So anyway, in 1899 they started getting water. 1902 was when the first power plant was enacted in Rocky Mount, or set in operation there. And I'll read you a little bit here in this passage in this book. I love this book already. Since the late 1880s, the Rocky Mount Board of Commissioners had watched the proliferation of municipally owned electric utilities across the Tar Heel State. Newton, just southwest of Hickory in 1887, had been the first community in North Carolina to build a municipal lighting system. During the next 13 years, an average of one municipality a year in the Tar Heel State opted for municipally owned ownership of an electric lighting system. When Kinston, Tarboro, Waynesville, and Wilson all elected to establish municipally owned electric utilities during the 1890s, Rocky Mount took notice. Unlike many other states, North Carolina in 1900 did not make specific provisions for municipalities to set up and own light plants or sewage works. But both the North Carolina legislature and the courts were sympathetic to the desire of communities to enter into municipal ownership of electric lights. In 1898, the Supreme Court of North Carolina ruled communities wishing to own and operate a municipal light plant needed special legislative authorization and had to hold a special referendum vote to approve the issuance of bonds to pay for the plant. I love that idea. It would cut out so much unnecessary spending by our local government. But the bottom line was Rocky Mount wanted power. The state's, okay, you got to have a referendum, let the public vote on it. You got to, put out your plan to the public and let them decide whether or not they want to spend the money to do this. If they agree to it, then you can sell bonds to pay for it, and you can build your plant. It says Rocky Mount took its case for a municipal light plant to the 1901 session of the North Carolina legislature. The town had been approached as far back as 1897 by S.K. Fountain. Now, S.K. Fountain, if you may not remember his name, he was a man of many talents. He actually had the first telephone switchboard in Rocky Mount. He was an inventor. He was a very intelligent man. And he was very much involved in a lot of Rocky Mount's early development from a technology standpoint. Okay, he proposed building an electric light plant and distribution line to Rocky Mount. By 1901, the town had determined to build a municipally owned light plant. Rather than ask specifically for the authorization to issue bonds for the construction of a municipal light plant, the town rolled its request into a comprehensive plan calling for construction of an electric light plant and a new sewer system, as well as the establishment of graded schools within the city limits. The proposed legislation asked for the authority to issue $40,000 in bonds, subject to a referendum approved by the voters. So, by this time, Charles B. Aycock, by the way, was the governor of North Carolina during this time frame. And he was a Democrat. He had gotten elected on a very strong platform of education. He was very much into education. He thought we should build more schools. Underprivileged kids especially need to be educated, he said. And so they put this package together that included plans and funds to build a power plant, to build a sewage system, and to build schools. And so they put it to the voters, and it passed. And so they began building the power plant. And in 1902, Rocky Mount, it says, let's see here, on New Year's Day, 1902, Mayor Thorpe, who was the mayor of Rocky Mount at the time, threw the switch that inaugurated municipally owned electric service in Rocky Mount. The 40 arc lights, ARC lights, that's kind of neat technology back then. It was like two electrodes in a vacuum glass bulb, like a regular light bulb. And when you threw electricity to it, it would arc across those two electrodes and it would glow. It didn't have a filament like modern day bulbs have a filament between the two electrodes. It was just two electrodes, and the arc between them would cause the light. So anyway, it said the 40 arc lights brightened the night sky over downtown Rocky Mount. The town's merchants were soon installing incandescent electric lighting in their stores and shops. Crowds showed up at the station just to watch steam-driven generator. A steam whistle hooked to the boiler was installed to notify railroad crews of emergencies along the track. The use of the signal was soon abandoned, however, because of the anxiety felt by railroad families whenever it blew. So 1902, Rocky Mount now, in addition to having clean water come out of Stony Creek, they've also got electric power to turn on lights up and down Main Street, businesses. And ironically, about the same time this is going on in City Rocky Mount Mills already had electric power at the plant. They were powering their mill with electricity from generators at the mill, and they also were providing electricity to some of the houses on the mill hill. So there was, at the same time, two types of power generation going on in Rocky Mount. Okay, where we stop at, Lee? Item number 5, I think. Let's go to item number 6. I mentioned the sewer plant that was part of this plan. This is an illustration that appeared in the book also. It's from 1914, 1915, and it says the city's second sewage purification plant was built downriver from Talbot Park in 1914, 1915. Shown are the plans for the chemical feed house. The plant would serve the city for 26 years. So where they're talking about is, if you know where Tom Stith Park is now, you've gone under the tunnel. Just before you get to the tunnel was where the previous sewage treatment plant would have been, but now you go under the tunnel, because it wasn't there during this time frame, but by now you go under the tunnel. A little bit further downstream would be where this plant was. This was the second sewage plant that Rocky Mount had, and this was more involved. By this time they had these chemical houses where they would store the chemicals involved in treating the wastewater and remove the bacteria and so forth before eventually letting the water flow back into Tar River. And so there was, an earnest effort to purify the water as best they could anyway, to keep from polluting Tar River any more than it already was. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 7. I stumbled across this ad and it just kind of made me chuckle. This was from 1917. The Rocky Mount Telegram, this ad appeared for Bullock Furniture Company. And basically it talks about an automatic refrigerator that Bullock had for sale. And I'm glad you stopped right here, Lee, because this is what I wanted to show the viewers. This automatic refrigerator had a hole in the top of it where you could take a glass jug full of water and turn it upside down, and somehow or another the water would go through this automatic refrigerator and it would chill the water, and I guess there was a spigot or something on the inside the refrigerator that you could then access the chilled water. Keep in mind, this is well before they had water lines that would connect your home water line to your refrigerator, and ice makers and all these internal things to chill water and do all that. This is a pretty ingenious idea. This was 1917 now. This is kind of ahead of its time here. I can just imagine the mess that was made when you went to pull this gallon jug full of water upside down and put it in that hole to get the water to go down inside the automatic refrigerator to chill it. But nonetheless, it was somebody's idea to market a refrigerator that would allow you to have chilled water anytime you wanted it, just by keeping a jug of water on top of it that you could pour down into. I'm guessing there was some kind of evaporator core or something inside the refrigerator there that the water would flow through or around or whatever and chill it. So anyway, it's a neat ad, I thought, from 1917. Okay, Lee, item number 8, July 26, 1919, this ad appeared. Now keep in mind, we were talking earlier about and I'm going to bounce back and forth because when I was doing my research, I kept finding these overlapping activities between the water and the power and the sewage and the water and the sewage and the power. So we're going to kind of bounce back and forth. July 26, 1919, this little short article appeared. It was talking about a flood. There had been a flood in the area. It says, since flood conditions have prevailed at the pumping station, the city health department has been making a daily analysis of water from the municipal plant in order to determine the purity of the water in the emergency at the filtering plant. Every analysis so far has shown the water to be entirely free from pollution and impurities, such purity when the river is such a swollen stage and the machinery at the station so severely taxed speaks most highly for the efficiency of the plant and the employees in charge. So again, this is post the Stony Creek pumping station because it shut down around 1910, 1912. It predates the water treatment plant on Sunset Avenue across the road from the power plant because it didn't come into existence until 1936. So this is just one more evidence, one more clue, if you will, that there was another pumping station providing water to the city of Rocky Mount in between the time that the Stony Creek pumping station was in existence and the time the new, quote unquote, new station would open up across Sunset Avenue, across from the power station there. Okay, all right. Fast forward a bit if we could. Let's see, I want to go my little book here. I'm going to flip a couple pages here because I've got a couple things I want to share with you before we get too far along. Okay, let's see here. All right. This is a little short article, a short paragraph I'm going to read for you. And it's talking about the Board of Aldermen, City of Rocky Mount Board of Aldermen said, the board hired F.D. Milstead to act as a consulting engineer for the project and paid E.M. Land $564 in the late summer of 1908 for 10 acres of land for the new water and light plant. The site was located on Stony Creek Road, now Sunset Avenue, adjacent to what would become the city lake during the 1930s. So again, this is actually another clue, and it's talking about, and again, I'm going to go back and read this last line. It says, the site was located on Stony Creek Road, which is now Sunset Avenue, adjacent to, that means beside, adjacent to what would become the city lake during the 1930s. A plot that at that time was described as lying on the Tar River on the west side of Tar River Lumber Company Tram Road, okay? So, if you remember, we talked about the Tar River Lumber Company in past shows, and they had a railroad track that came down by the river down there and would carry lumber off. So this was in 1908 was when this 10 acres was put in place for work for this plant here. And there's another little section over here on the other page. It says, let's see here. Central Carolina Construction Company submitted the successful bid of just under $10,000 for the construction of a brick powerhouse, and local contractor D.J. Rose was selected to build the sedimentation and clear well basins for the pumping station. Rose's contractors quickly discovered quicksand on the site, which necessitated moving the business several hundred feet. When the job was finished in the fall of 1909, Rocky Mount boasted some of the most modern water pumping and filtration and electric generation facilities in North Carolina. The waterworks plant consisted of one large Laidlaw-Dunn-Gordon compound condensing, compound duplex pumping engine rated at 2.5 million gallons capacity every 24 hours, two Smithville compound duplex pumps rated at 750,000 gallons capacity every 24 hours, backed up the Laidlaw-Dunn-Gordon pump. The filtering system included two New York Continental Jewel filters with a daily capacity of 2 million gallons. A large concrete reinforced reservoir held 500,000 gallons of water in storage. The reinforced concrete settling basin, which had been installed in late 1908, was 6 foot deep and 75 feet in diameter. So again, even before they stopped pumping water at the Stony Creek, they had begun building this new pumping station over here by the power plant. Okay, Lee, it's time for our next commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to show you some more pictures. We'll talk a little bit more about some of what went into making all this happen. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday. Take it away, Lee.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
And we're back. You know, I was mentioning a minute ago about the state law was in 1905 actually that came along and said, you know, if you live, or if your municipality is adjacent to any kind of flowing water, stream, creek, whatever, it's now illegal to dump raw sewage into it. And so that all the cities up and down Tar River and every other river in the state for that matter began trying to implement policies and procedures and protocols to treat their wastewater. When I was reading about this, I stumbled across a couple of things that were interesting. It says in 1907, Rocky Mount had made an unsuccessful bid to secure the site of the East Carolina Teachers Training School, affectionately referred to as ECTC, later to become known as East Carolina University. But anyway, of course, the State Board of Education located a school in Greenville. It goes on to say, at the time, sewage plant assets consisting of sewer lines amounted about $18,000. In the spring of 1910, the mayor requested additional time from the State Board of Health to come into compliance with the 1905 revisions. And by the way, I mentioned Greenville. Tarboro also, of course, downstream of Rocky Mount, was the recipient of our polluted waters, and so it was in everybody's interest to get all this sorted out, obviously. But anyway, it goes on to talk about, it says, by November, the Water Committee had identified a site for the proposed sewage purification plant. The 2-acre site was located on Nash County side of the city, owned by J.P. Bunn and W.E. Parrish. The property was south of and abutting the Tar River, west of and abutting the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad, and included part of what is now Riverside Drive, leading from North Church Street. And by the way, back then, that area was Riverside Drive. If you follow Riverside Drive all the way back around, of course, it's hard to think about Riverside Drive now, but you can get confused with River Drive, and Riverside Drive are two different roads. But anyway, it says, abutting the Atlantic Coastline Railroad right away included part of what is now Riverside Drive, leading from North Church Street east under the railroad trestle into Tom Stith Park. The property remains to this day the lowest point on Rocky Mount's sewage system. So it's a very low area along in there. If you remember, anytime it rains, appreciable rain, that trestle area will flood, and they put up barricades. You can't get through there. It'll get 1.5 to 2 foot deep quite often in there. Okay, so Rocky Mount's progressing. We're building gas plants. We're updating our facilities. Everything is just moving along. By 1925, lead item number 9, the city of Rocky Mount had this plaque placed in the power plant. Really neat plaque. I found this in this book actually, and I want to go look and see if it's still there. My guess is somewhere in the building this plaque is still there, but it reads, City of Rocky Mount Municipality Power Plant erected 1924 to 1925. The mayor at that time was Mr. T.T. Horn. It mentions a Mr. C.H. Harris, city, I can't read that. Anyway, and it mentions the alderman. But it's a really nice, looks like a brass plaque perhaps, and it's mounted somewhere on the wall there, I'm guessing inside that building. Item number 10, Lee, this is an article I found, and I just wanted to kind of read, I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's kind of a long article, but this appeared in the Rocky Mount Herald newspaper, March 2nd, 1934, and it's talking about water plant funds assured. And I'm not going to read this whole thing. It said, there's one part I want to read particularly. It says, Mr. Olson is expected in the city this week to confer with Mr. Aycock regarding the site for the plant. It had been planned to erect a plant near the present municipal power plant at the intersection of West Thomas Street and Sunset Avenue. It is thought the site agreed upon will be in the vicinity in the municipal lake, probably adjoining West Haven. So, of course, this is talking about the, the water plant. They refer to it as a modern filtering plant. So, again, this was in 1934, March 34. They had just managed to get all this funding and everything in order to build the new water treatment plant. I think item number 11, Lee, this was in August of 1934, again in the Rocky Mount Herald. And it says contracts for erection of the water plant to be made next month. Cost is $250,000. Awarding of the contracts on the principal building in connection with the new water plant and reservoir to be erected here was to be made at August 16 at 2:30 o'clock in the afternoon. The contracts will be awarded in 3 sections as to many companies will assure an early start on the erection of the $250,000 filtering plant opposite the municipal power plant at the intersection of Sunset Avenue and West Thomas Street. So again, this is 1934. This is when they were preparing to build the new water plant across the street from the power plant, and apparently by all indications the other previous water plant was adjacent to the power plant. Okay, item number 12, Lee. I stumbled across this ad. I just wanted to share this with you because I thought I'd heard of every restaurant that ever been in Rocky Mount. We've done several shows about various restaurants and eateries and so forth. But this ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Herald May 18, 1934, and it's an ad for the Lake View Inn. It says, for good things to eat, fried chicken dinners a specialty, 40 cents, Mrs. Betty West Jordan, and you see there it says opposite the pumping station. So in 1934, the new pumping station, the new water treatment station there is not in operation yet. It's been authorized, funds have been allocated, they start building any day now. But at this point, the only pumping station in existence had to be the one there beside the power plant because, as I said earlier, the one out by Stony Creek had been shut down around 1910 or 1912. So I'm a little confused by their direction opposite pumping stations. I don't know if that means it was over toward West Haven side, or if it was across the river, across Tar River, or if it was across Sunset Avenue. Back then it would have been referred to, of course, as Stony Creek Road. But in any case, just a neat ad here for a restaurant that I never knew anything about, Lakeview Inn. Okay. All right, item number 13, Lee. In 1936, power plants up and running. It began to get a lot of attention and notice. There was a magazine called Waterworks Engineering, and they did a spread, if you will, on our water plant. It says Waterworks Engineering, one of the more prestigious trade publications serving the nation's water utility industry, devoted a cover story to Rocky Mount's new waterworks in 1936. You know, we're talking, Bob League and I were talking today, this place was really, it was designed not only to be efficient and to be modern and to be practical, it was almost a work of art. If you ride by and look at that building, next time you ride by, just take a gander, look over there at it. The outside is really neat. The inside, it's been many, many years since I was in this place. We took a field trip when I was in elementary school and went to this place and went inside. I barely remember it, but I remember walking inside, just looking around and being astounded. It was just really neat to look at. I understand that now the city is making available tours again. You know, they shut them down from 9/11, and for many, many years you couldn't tour any public operations, including the dam, the reservoir, the sewer plant out on Highway 97, none of that. But I saw today, in fact, on the city website that there's a form you can fill out now, and you can get permission to take a tour of the water treatment plants, both this one and the one out by the reservoir out there, and the wastewater treatment plant out on Highway 97. So that might be a neat day, a neat way to spend a few hours one day if you get kind of bored and you don't have anything to do. Go take a tour of the water treatment plants. But anyway, in 1936, the Waterworks Engineering magazine did this really neat spread, and that's a really nice picture there showing the inside of the building. I'm not sure why that thing is inside itself. It's like the magazine is listed twice there. I don't know why that is. But anyway, item number 14, Lee, this is just a page 2 spread. And I'm going to just read a little bit of this because it's a really neat article. It says the city of Rocky Mount is is located in the eastern section of North Carolina on the main line of the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad. It is the center of a fertile agricultural district whose principal crops are tobacco and cotton. Principal industries are textile mills and tobacco re-drying plants. The Emerson shops of the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad are located within the city limits. Growth in population has been rapid in recent years. In 1934, the city of Rocky Mount applied to the Public Works Administration for a loan and grant to provide certain improvements to the water system. The main items were construction of a filtration plant, the erection of an elevated steel tank. The plant is located on the corner of Sunset and West Thomas Street. The tank, of course, is over on Marigold Street by the post office over there. But anyway, this was a really nice story that appeared, and they really did a nice feature story on the whole operation out there. Okay, we're getting low on time, Lee. Let's move on. Item number 15. This was a picture we've shared before in a previous show. This is just a picture of the power plant from 1942. And the caption here kind of caught my attention. It says, the onset of World War II in 1941 caused utilities around the nation to institute defense measures. Early in the spring of 1942, Rocky Mount city crews strung barbed wire around the electric light plant to protect it from potential saboteurs. So who knew that at one point in World War II, for fear of the plant being sabotaged, the city had workers string barbed wire all the way around the power plant. How about that? Item number 16, Lee, August 17, 1944. Rocky Mount, again, is recognized for water supply facilities. There was another magazine called The American City. The American City did a feature story and pointed out the Rocky Mount's water facilities and water and sewage for that matter too. Said the addition to the plant consists of 5 filter beds, was completed in March 1942. These plants underwent continual upgrades as the population progressed, as increased, I should say, and it was a constant need to improve, and Rocky Mount did that to its credit. Every time there was a need to provide more power or more clean water or more treated sewage, the funds were available for that. The common phrase is infrastructure. And, you know, Rocky Mount has been, of late, over the last few years, been criticized, you know, some might say unfairly, but the point is they've been criticized for not spending enough money on infrastructure. And frankly, I think it's probably, some of that criticism is worthy of being criticized. I mean, that needs to be done. Okay, Lee, item number 17. This was a picture that I ran across too, and this just shows another look, an aerial view showing the city lake there in the foreground at the bottom of the picture. You see the power plant there to your left, the Tar River going diagonally near the top left of your screen, and of course directly across Sunset Avenue from those round storage tanks, you see those white storage tanks, is the water treatment plant there. And you see Thomas Street coming in from the right there at an angle. Just a neat aerial photograph there. This is from the 1960s, actually. Okay, we're going to run out of time before we get the rest of these, I think, Lee. Let's go ahead. Item number 18, October 3rd, 1947. There was a neat article in the Rocky Mount Telegram that talked about Rocky Mount's progress over the years. Another feature story here is the water treatment plant at the top, and down below is pictures of portions of the water treatment plant on the left and the power plant to the right. The next picture, number 19, Lee, is another aerial photograph showing, and this is kind of blurry and grainy, I apologize. This kind of shows a little bit later view from 1947. The previous picture I showed you aerial was from 1960, so this is actually an earlier picture from 1947. Number 20, Lee, power plant generator, circa 1950. This was the generator floor of the municipal light plant around 1950. The turbine generators in use at the time were too small to cope with the rapid growth of kilowatt-hour demand in Rocky Mount in the years following World War II. So after World War II, Rocky Mount's population began a little bit of an explosion. They needed more electricity. What we ended up doing, by the way, was, shuttering, I should say, this plant around 1959 and began buying power from Carolina Power and Light. Okay, Lee, in 1967, during the Centennial Edition, there was this article that appeared, and it tells the history. It says, first electric lights turned on in 1902. That building you see there was the original power plant before they built the new one. Pearsall Machine Works was in that building later years. It's over in between Franklin Street and Church Street, Franklin Street and Church Street, there by the railroad tracks on the left-hand side. But there was another machine shop was in there before Pearsall got it. Building's in bad shape now. I ride by periodically. The roof's falling in. It's in terrible shape. But anyway, hope we got time for one more. Number 22, Lee, 1968, there was a drought, severe drought in Rocky Mount. This picture shows an earthen dam. They literally dammed up Stony Creek. And I didn't quite understand this. As an earthen dam impounded what little flow of water there was from Stony Creek for capture behind the city's water intake main during the 1968 drought. In September and October, Rocky Mount residents cut their water consumption in half to assist the city in surmounting the low water crisis. So they dammed up Stony Creek, and I'm not quite sure what the purpose of that was. I don't know, unless it was to keep water from Tar River flowing up into the creek. I don't see how that could have happened, but in any case, this was an earthen dam, it says, across Stony Creek. Lastly, it was one more, Lee. Number 23, wastewater treatment plant, Leggett Road. This has since been torn down, but this was a plant that was there. It was built in 1941. The Leggett Road wastewater treatment plant was expanded in 1957 and again in 1965. Because of neighborhood residential encroachment around the facility, it was decommissioned and abandoned in 1982 and demolished in 1990. Folks, that's going to do it for us. We run slam out of time. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope you learned something. If you got any questions, write them down. Give me a call next week or next week's show. We'll try to get your questions answered. And I'm going to read some more of this book and try to get some more information for next week's show. There's other history besides just utility stuff in here. So stay tuned, folks. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. And we'll see you next week with more Way Back Wednesday. Good night.